In this video, we'll start working with the project application that will use Redux as its central state store. We'll begin by downloading Redux and the React Redux integration package. We'll then set up Redux, including the folder structure and the base state store. By now, you have a theoretical understanding of Redux. The fundamental architecture of Redux involves a store, a set of reducer functions that can mutate the store, and a series of actions that are the only way your UI can express its intent to mutate the store. Now, the best way to understand Redux is to use it in an actual project. So without ado, let's start working with a practical project. We'll continue working with this project in successive videos, adding features incrementally as we go along. Start by downloading and setting up the project from the link given on the screen, then type npm start to kickstart the development server. We have a very simple shopping application here which incorporates React Router and offers two major sections. The default or root route shows the catalog of products. We also have buttons for departments or categories which should allow us to filter the catalog of products. Every product is listed here with its cost and an add to cart button, a pretty standard feature. Once a product is added to the cart, it can be viewed here. On this screen, you can update the quantity of an item and can also remove it from the list if needed. Every time the quantity is changed or the item removed, the total cost and quantity should also update in real time. As I mentioned earlier, we are using React Router to render the catalog and the cart components, which offer the two views you just saw. So part of the benefit of using a centralized state store is that components can access state independently and you don't have to create a tree of props from the nearest parent. Alright, let's install Redux. So I'll pop open a new terminal first. Then I'll type npm i redux and react redux. Redux by itself is framework and library agnostic, which is why we also need the React Redux package for integration with our React application. With this done, let's set up a folder structure that will help us organize our store, reducer functions, and actions. In this video, we'll scaffold a basic structure and we'll build on it in successive videos. So let's begin by creating a folder called store. This will be the root of our Redux setup. So I'll create a subfolder called reducers. Our app has two broad domains of data and mutations. The catalog is responsible for managing the contents of the catalog and departments. On the other hand, we have the cart, which should allow us to add, update quantity, and remove items. Therefore, it is prudent to create two sets of reducer functions so that there is a clear separation of logic by domains. So in the reducers folder, I'll create a file called catalogreducer.js. Now remember we said in the last video that a reducer is just a pure function that takes state and an action and returns a mutated version of the state after applying the said action. Well, that's what we'll build here. We'll export a function that accepts state and action, and for now we'll simply return the state without any changes. We'll build on this functionality as we go along. This function will be the only way to mutate the catalog portion of the state inside the store. Now, this is also where you can initialize the state with a structure or even data. For now, we have a file here known as catalog sample state.js. And we'll copy this data set into our catalog reducer file, and I'll name this initial state. You'll notice we have two sets of arrays, namely departments and products, and a property called filter, which we've set to null for now. We'll deal with all this later. For now, I'll set my reducer's state to this initial state so that when the app loads up, we have some data to see. You may be asking yourself, what if I want to load up all this data from my database or an API? We'll get to that in the very last video, so hang tight. With this done, we'll also set up a cart reducer in a file named cartreducer.js. Once again, we'll build the same kind of function we made in the catalog reducer. And once again, we'll initialize the shape of our state. For the cart, we'll create a property named total cost, which we'll set to 0, total products, which will hold the quantity of products in the cart, which we'll set to 0, and an items array, which is where the products would be stored once added to the cart. The contents of this structure would be mutated by this reducer when actions are dispatched. We'll build actions in successive videos. With these two separate reducers created, we need to combine them before we can use them with Redux. For this purpose, in my reducers folder, I'll create an index.js file. Here, I'll import both my reducer functions first. Then, we'll import a function named combine reducers from the Redux package. Using this function, we will combine both reducers under the domain names catalog and cart. It should be noted that there is only one central state object in Redux, and separation of data is strictly by domain. So by combining our two reducers, the final state currently looks like this. You can see the catalog and cart properties and their sub-properties here. With our reducers ready, it is time to instantiate a Redux store. So in the store folder, I'll create an index.js file first. Here, we'll import the create store function from the Redux library. I'll also import what I now like to call the root reducer from the reducers folder. This is the outcome of using the combine reducers function. We can now export an invocation of the create store function passing in our root reducer. The create store function can also be used to initialize the state just as we did directly in our reducer functions. The output of create store is the complete state of your application that your React app can subscribe to, so that any mutations result in updates to the UI. So all that is left to do is to connect our React app with Redux. For this, I'll head into the index.js file at the root of my application. This is where we mount the React app into the DOM. We'll import the provider component from the React Redux library. This works a bit like the context API and its provider and consumer components. We'll also import the store. And to get it all working, we'll wrap our app component in the provider component, passing in the store like so. All components downstream can now access our store using helper functions, utilities, and hooks that Redux provides. Before we end, we can safely delete the sample state file. This is no longer needed. Alright, we have set up Redux, but still there is a lot to be done. So let's begin by building actions and reducer for the catalog portion of our state in the next video.